We're all good? Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Grind, and I'm the lead faculty for the Digital Media and Fine Arts program here at Terra. I know most all of everybody here. And I had the privilege of hearing our guest speaker at the OACC conference back in November, and found him to be a very dynamic speaker, and we actually got some good information from him. So I'm pleased to have this opportunity to introduce Mr. Jim Simpson. Jim will be speaking to us today on how we can accelerate our Ohio Community College's completion agenda. Jim has over 30 years experience in industry and higher education. Jim is currently the executive director at the College of Central Florida. In this role, he provides leadership to assist 7 Florida colleges in serving 23 Florida counties to increase the number of graduates in high demand areas. This role is not new to Jim. Since May of 1996, he's assisted over 55 colleges to implement strategies to improve their graduation rates, including both Lorain County Community College and Stark State College here in Ohio. Jim's role as an innovator and leader in higher education has been recognized by a number of organizations, including the U.S. Department of Labor, the League for Innovations in Community Colleges, and the National Institute for Staff and Organizational Development. In 2009, in recognition of his achievements and lifelong commitment to higher education in the United States, Jim received the Paul A. Elsner International Leadership Award. The Elsner Award is given annually to 2 outstanding education administrators in the world. Jim is just the 26th U.S. citizen to receive this prestigious award. When you ask Jim what his greatest accomplishments have been, he will tell you 4 things: convincing his wife Linda to marry him, having a loving family, the friends he's made over the years, and the difference that education has made in his life and the lives of over 48,000 students who have graduated from college programs that have been responsible for his leading. So without further ado, please join me in giving a warm Terra State welcome to Mr. Jim Simpson.
Good morning. Good morning. Greetings from Florida, the land of sunshine and warmth. You know, when I came to the school this morning, I put my GPS in, turned it on, and it said, "Please make a legal U-turn and go home." Now, this next part, I'm required to do this by state statute. So you'll have to forgive me. For any Floridian who is traveling north of Florida during the winter months, this is actually in our educational statute, what I'm required to do. You know, again, if you happen to see ads from Florida schools, you will notice they typically come up this part of the world this time of the year. There is a reason for that. Okay. What we're going to be talking about is how we can go about doubling our enrollment, our graduation rate. And again, I'm from the College of Central Florida. If you're not familiar with Florida geography, we're located in Ocala, which is in the middle part of the state. Again, by state law, we're required to give you location using Disney World as a base. So we're 70 miles from the land of the mouse, okay? It's a beautiful area. If you're familiar with the hills of Kentucky, the Bluegrass Hills, this is the hill country. And believe it or not, Florida has hill country of the state. In fact, we are the thoroughbred capital of the world. huge concentrations of racehorses in our service area. And the reason for that is we don't have snow. You know, Kentucky doesn't have alligators, we don't have snow. So evidently that works well for racehorses also. Again, the consortium that we're a part of, we're responsible for bringing up 38 programs in what's predominantly rural community colleges and increasing the rate of graduation at those colleges. So this is just a natural part, if I can push the right buttons, this is just a natural part of what we've been doing for a number of years. When I was with International Thompson, I was part of a team when we would acquire companies that would go out and do due diligence. And due diligence is where you go in and actually verify the assets of the company that you're about to buy to see if you're paying a really fair price and if they've really shown you what their assets are. And we referred to it as our number, trying to get our number. And so in order to share with you due diligence, I'm going to tell you what my number is. How many of y'all have read Bill George's book? This was a seminal book in my life because he talked about transformational moments. We all have transformational moments in our personal lives, our religious lives, our social lives, our work lives. And my transformational moment occurred in May 1996 in a suburb of Houston, Texas. I had had moved, can't get the word out because I'm cold this morning, had transitioned from my job where I was a stock option baby at Thompson in January of that year to a dean of an academic department at a college that was part of the Lone Star College system, which is in the northern suburbs of Houston. 4 months later, in May, was eagerly looking forward to seeing how many graduates our division had produced. Got the report. And when I opened the report, I thought, there's some mistake. There were only 5 names. 5 names. Folks, I've told that story several times, and I still have the same visceral reaction that I did in May of 1996. That division consisted of 110 full-time faculty and staff, had 40 degree and certificate programs. We produced 5 graduates. That wasn't for the spring. That was for the academic year. And when I started asking around, people said, "Oh, Jim, don't worry. Don't worry. Our students don't graduate." Obviously, not in my department they weren't. They job out. They transfer away. They swirl in and out. They just don't graduate. And those 5 names forced me to look at myself in the mirror. And that's not a pretty sight to begin with. But evaluate what I was doing as a dean. And what I saw what I was doing as a new dean, was a lot of activities that maybe didn't have the right meaning. And the reason I had transitioned from industry and education is I'm a terrible golfer. I get bored playing golf, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to make a contribution because I had taught at a community college back in the, when they had hair, okay? And so from that moment on, I decided I would do whatever I could to increase the graduation rates at the colleges I was associated with. And everything that has happened in my professional life has been a direct result of that transformational moment that occurred in May 1996 in Tomball, Texas. And since that period of time, 49,961 and that's as of this fall graduation, have graduated from programs that I've been responsible for. That's my number. Thank you. Now, a lot of what we're going to be talking about is the journey that we took to Jacksonville when I was at Florida State College at Jacksonville. We're a large school, 5 campuses, 5 centers, producing over 78 to 100 students, graduates. We were the fourth largest producer in the United States of graduates. And in terms of the workforce programs, where I was the executive dean of workforce, we had over 17,000 students in 173 different degree and certificate programs, producing over 4,700 graduates. And we were the 6th largest producer of ADN graduates in the United States and the 11th largest producer of allied health programs in the United States. And part of what got us there, because we more than doubled over that length of time, was the willingness to take risks, just like y'all are beginning to take risks now at your own institution. So how are community colleges in Ohio doing? Well, an average of about 16% of your students graduate within 150% of their time of degree. So if you got a 60-hour degree, you got 3 hours or 3 years to get through it. The median is about 15%, and here's the normal range. And y'all are actually at a 12.3% graduation rate. Even though you're slightly below the median, you're within the normal range of distribution for the state of Ohio. I will tell you the state of Ohio is below the national average, and it's below the average for the Aspen 150. Does anybody know what the Aspen 150 is? Aspen 150 are community colleges that are designated as the top 150 community colleges in the United States by the Aspen Foundation based on measurable criteria, which includes retention, graduation, and this is the graduation and retention over a 3-year period for both their whole student body, also students of color, also Pell students, low-income students. By the way, College of Central Florida, I should say this, in the 3 times that they have designated the Aspen 150 in the last 6 years, it's done every 2 years. We've been an Aspen 150 school 2 of those 3 times. In Florida, of the 28 community colleges, every year in the last 3 years, 14 of the colleges have been named Aspen 150. And the reason only 14 is in the Aspen criteria, only half of your schools in your state can make that criteria. In Ohio, Lorain County has received that nomination 2 times, and last time around Southern has received it in the state of Ohio. So here's the challenge. We've got this completion agenda, and we're looking at a goal of 8 million additional graduates in the United States. And this is your share of how many you're supposed to be getting in Ohio. You need 290,000 additional graduates by 2020, when you start having that vision that I heard about. So it shouldn't be hard, because when you look at U.S. community college enrollments, and I really wouldn't be that upset with how y'all are doing right now, because this is the national trend that you're seeing. And y'all look kind of like the national trend in terms of your FTE growth. Y'all have actually had a 28% growth since 2004, which is pretty good. In terms of the growth in graduates, what we've seen in the U.S., we've had a growth in the graduates. In Ohio, we've had a very nice growth in graduates, 68% in the last 10 years. At Terra State, though, it's been kind of flat, 8%, almost 9% over a 10-year period. In terms of the U.S. community college 150% graduation rate, this should be scary. A 13% decline over a 10-year period, to a point where around 21% of our first-time, full-time and college students are graduating within 150% of their degree length. In Ohio, it's about 18%. And really, if you look at the trend, not much change over 10 years. Now, great improvements made. Ohio recognized right about in here that they had an issue and began to make significant inroads into the decline they were having. In Terra, what you see is about a 46% increase. And again, it kind of mirrors what you're seeing in the state. By the way, I'm a nerd. I embrace my nerdness. Anybody else here a nerd? Hallelujah. Okay. This is a wonderful S-curve. And to tell you about my nerdness, one Christmas, my Christmas gift from my wife was a piece of software that you could use to generate and forecast S-curves. And it still makes the hair on my arm stand up when I talk about it. In terms of the graduate projections that I've done for Terra State using that wonderful S-curve projection, is at the rate you're going, about 340 graduates if you don't change anything, is what you're looking at. And in terms of the number of graduates you need in order to carry your share of Ohio's share, is you need about 305 more graduates. So in other words, you need to be up somewhere around 650 graduates a year in order to meet your share, which we'll talk about. It's doable. So what does it mean? Well, y'all were talking about your growth. I'm going to talk about FTE. I'm going to couch it in FTE. Your FTE growth, if you look at it, you're going to be doing pretty good. You know, you're going to be up around 3,000 FTE by the end of the decade. But because of your efficiencies, graduates per FTE, if you're going to meet that goal, you're not going to be able to grow out of it. Because I don't think you're going to reach 4,100 FTE. So you're going to have to become more efficient. You're going to have to work smarter in order to meet your graduation goals. So why are we falling short? College Completion America says, here are some things. Here's Jim's version, scaled down Reader's Digest. It's difficult for students to navigate our systems. In fact, during some of the meetings, I went on your Facebook pages and started reading the reviews. And I would say this is probably an issue here. We tend to be reactive versus proactive. And our innovations don't go to scale. Kay McClenny at the University of Texas has this wonderful saying that what we do in education is we take a Christmas ornament and hang it on a dead tree. Doesn't bring the tree back to life. Makes the tree look pretty, but doesn't help the tree. So we need to rethink the college practices. And I know you've seen this before. I hope you've seen this before, because there's 4 separate silos. Usually what happens at a college when we're talking about a completion agenda is we think of it in isolated initiatives. And those initiatives, really, you need to look at it more holistic to be able to come up with a strategy for what you're going to be wanting to do. So how do we go about putting together the pieces? By the way, I never solved the Rubik's Cube, so that should tell you something about maybe this next section. I want you to start thinking about potential graduates from your degree or certificates as everybody in this box. Students who have completed all their course requirements. So we should be graduating these people, right? Okay. Well, this is what actually happens. They don't all graduate. Some of them do, some of them don't. And the reason for that is a lot of times the program of study code or the major code doesn't reflect intent. Where that is important in your systems that you have, before your systems can operate smoothly and effectively, that code for that program that student's taking needs to be in their student record. If it's not in the student record, your degree audits don't work. So it has to be accurate. So these program of study codes aren't accurate. The students have changed their program of study. They just hadn't bothered to tell you, okay? So here's a typical student, here's a typical profile of a college. So you've got a fairly small percentage that have actually graduated, and you've got these up here that haven't. So what we're trying to do with our strategies is, first of all, capture everybody in the box that we can. And then secondly, we want to expand the box. So what we're going to be talking about are some systems so we can catch everything in the box. And then we're going to talk about some strategies there where we can expand the box. So here's 6 key strategies and what I'll be talking about today. First one is automatic processes. When we talk about automatic processes, I want you to think in terms of the theoretical graduation rate, which is a calculation that I model, and that's based upon your student mix, full-time, part-time. There will be a test on this one, okay? 65% of your students are part-time, 35% full-time. It's going to be important. I want you to remember that. We're going to have a test. There'll be a reward. You'll get to maybe wear my coat for a little bit so you can get warm. And here's your actual graduation rate, 12.3%. That gap between those two is how much your system is losing. So you're losing about 35 graduates per year. Now this is only associate degree graduates that you're losing at this point in time. Doesn't sound significant, but that's over 10% of your total graduates you produced in the last year that I had data. So when you look at a system design, what you're doing is you're getting rid of manual processes. You're not relying on manual processes have single points of failure. And a lot of times what we do in education is we have a manual process that feeds a manual process that feeds a manual process that feeds a manual process. So single point of failure, single point of failure, single point of failure. And the reason it's a single point of failure a lot of times is we're staffed fairly leanly. So Jim may be the key person in this second manual process. Jim gets the flu. He's out for 3 weeks. And it's at a critical time when you're trying to verify your graduates. So you've got a system failure. So what you're trying to do is implement automatic systems so that you can have real quick gains in graduation, because you're actually capturing the people that you have worked so hard to complete at your college. These are students who have already earned their degree. How many of y'all like to pay baggage fees? Can I see a show of hands? I actually had one lady hold up her hand at a meeting, and so I thought I need to go talk. It ended up her husband was a pilot for American Airlines, so go figure. None of us do, but we charge it. We have a luggage fee. It's called a graduation fee. A graduation fee, regardless of the size, will have an impact on your graduation rate. I actually had an intern from the University of Texas Community College Leadership Program, and I asked him just to take a look at the super large colleges, those colleges with over 20,000 FTE. And what they found was the 31 colleges with the lowest graduation rates had graduation fees. Those with the highest graduation rates did not. In fact, we were having a conversation last night where it came out that some of your certificate graduates are choosing not to graduate because it's a $15 fee. They're going to wait until they get to their associate degree. Generally, a graduation fee will reduce your graduation rate by about 3%. So if you eliminate the graduation fee, it's one of the first steps you can do, because it really sends a loud message. Your students may not hear that message, but your community, meaning y'all, will. It means we're really placing an emphasis. And if the money is important, You know, several of the Tennessee schools had issues with doing away with their graduation fees that we worked with. And what they ended up doing is charging a small fee to every student who registered. And generally, they were trying to collect about $25,000, $27,000 a year to pay for their graduation. And that's how they went about collecting that fee. And then the students didn't have to worry about it later on and having to come up with that money. The highest graduation fee I have seen at a public supported college was $150. And that was in Louisiana, and they were wondering why their graduation rate was 3.5%. Other automatic processes that we're going to talk about is auto-grad, auto-populate, and auto-program a study. These are not programs. These are things you can do within your own ERP systems, like your new banner system that you're getting. Auto-grad. What auto-grad is an automatic degree audit that is run periodically on every single student at your college. So a student doesn't have to apply for graduation. Single point of failure. You run it automatically. The best way, if you really want to make my hair stand up on my arms, is run a graduation audit with every single program of study code you have against every single student you have. Oh yeah, I get the shivers. We got another nerd over here. I mean, that is really the golden data that you'll get. And so typically, again, we said this, with AutoGrad, what happens is you're getting everybody whose program of study code was at least correct. Impacted AutoGrad at Jacksonville. The students no longer had to apply for graduation. And in 1 year, we increased the number of graduates by 42%. And that's a fairly decent base. From 1,300 to almost 1,900 graduates. And our yield, I'm really interested about yield because we can all kind of say we've increased the number of graduates, but really that's been a factor of how many students. You know, it's kind of mass merchandising. We bring as many in the door, and if we have a 20% kill rate, if we have a bigger base, you know, more students walk across. Well, our yield increased from 0.32 graduates per FTE to 0.42 graduates. That's a 31% increase. Much more efficient. Limitation with AutoGrad is real simple. If that program of study isn't correct, AutoGrad's not going to do anything for you. AutoPop. What is AutoPop? Y'all have a wonderful selection of short certificate programs. What AutoPop does is you develop a parent-child relationship. You say, this is the associate degree. Here are the certificates that are associated with this associate degree. And when that student declares that associate degree as their major, you automatically populate those codes associated with those certificate programs that you've fully embedded. Let me repeat that, fully embedded. Let me repeat that, fully embedded into that certificate program. In fact, what you can do is take a look at other certificate programs that you didn't think were fully embedded in another program, and you may end up with a core certificate that goes into multiple degrees like y'all are trying to do with your business degree. So that's AutoPop. Once you have AutoPop, remember the ERP, AutoGrad, has to work from those program of study codes. Now you can begin to get more accurate generation of graduates associated with your certificates. And the reason you need it is in that rush when they're seeing your advisors, very seldom will the advisors write down the certificate code. Very seldom will the student write down the certificate code. Very seldom will the program managers write down the certificate code. And you don't need a fancy system for this. You know, for 5 years of my life, I did this manually. Every semester on every major within my division, I did this manually. Couldn't convince my college to do it. And then when I went to Jacksonville, they said, sounds like a good idea. And what happens is you see increases in graduates. In fact, this is your current mix. 80% of your graduates come from associate degrees, and 19% come from your certificates. What this mix should look like is 50% of your total graduates should be coming from certificate programs. So you've got this great base, you just haven't leveraged the base yet. Again, here's the typical profile, and here's what we're doing with the auto pop. Again, if those associate degree program of study codes are not correct, auto pop will help you, but you won't see a big increase. So it gave us a technology solution at Jacksonville, but in 1 year, we increased the number of certificate graduates by 61%. And look at the base, 1,400 to over 2,300. And again, we increased the efficiency from 0.31 to 0.46 graduates per FTE. Same caveat on auto grad as you do with auto pop, meaning if the program of study is not correct, then it's not going to work all that well for you. Boy, that's a good looking graduating group, isn't it? Y'all recognize them? That's y'all's. Auto POS. Auto POS, and someone, granted I was raised on the ranch and worked in the oil field. I didn't realize what POS acronym was until Springfield. It took an Ohioan to tell me what maybe I needed to change that. So it just flashed on me. I didn't get around to changing this. But the auto POS, what you're doing is taking a look at students' course-taking behaviors, and based on their course-taking behaviors, you're making a determination of what their POS should be. So I'll give you an example. You've got a welding program. The student doesn't have a welding POS, but they're taking intro to welding. What do you think the student's interested in doing? Probably welding. So that's what these systems are doing. And the reason it's needed is, again, you have to have the program of study codes to be good, but the reason they're not as accurate is during, at least at my college, during rush, they were relying on the memory of 176 different codes, and really the only two codes they could remember were nursing and 1108. And 1108 was AA intended major. And that's really a safe choice for students, but it's not an accurate reflection of maybe what they were wanting to do. And lastly, students don't understand they have to have these program of study codes. So they change their mind. We don't have systems that say, hey, this person's taking courses out of their program of study. So as a result, we don't know they've changed their mind. And so the student doesn't really know when they graduate. Think of it this way. You buy a house. If you buy a house, and my mortgage company, first of all, wouldn't tell you how much the monthly payment is. Secondly, wouldn't tell you when you paid off the mortgage. Thirdly, when you wanted to inquire whether you paid off the mortgage, we're going to charge you a $15 or a $35 or $50 graduation fee, mortgage fee in order to be able to determine it. You'd probably take your business someplace else. But that's an accepted model for us in education. So why is auto POS needed? The research is really clear. It has to be based on student course-taking behavior. So how do we go about reconciling that with financial aid? I spent big bucks on the graphics you're about to see. Front-end POS, and this is how it works. The student tries to register for a class. The system says, is this associated with the program of study? Yes or no. If it says yes, student's admitted into class. If the student has said no, they're not admitted into the class. So essentially, you're treating each one of your programs as a restricted access program. That's the short and simple. And when the flag comes up, it says, Jim, you've got to go see an advisor. before we're going to admit, because this may impact your financial aid. It's definitely going to impact your time to degree. Then once Jim makes the correct choice, auto grad and auto pop can do their thing, and then the little smiley face because I finally did graduate from your college. So here's the typical profile, and here's what we get when we're able to implement some sort of automatic major code for our institutions. Impact of auto POS at FSCJ, we had a 14% increase in 1 year on our graduates, and that was when we were at a substantial base to begin with. Actually, the group that benefited the most were our AA students. They had almost a 24% increase in the number of graduates in AA. And we had a 3% increase in our yield efficiency for our workforce programs at Jacksonville. Limitations, auto pop, you'll have some issues with VA students, but actually some of those issues have gone away because the VA really requires the student to be they can't take courses outside their program of study. And if you're trying to identify those trigger courses like the Intro to Welding, you'll find out not all courses have these unique trigger courses associated with them. At Jacksonville, we found we had 3 programs that didn't have unique trigger courses, and that's out of 176 programs. So we've talked about how you can pick up 35 additional graduates. The second part is looking at graduate strategy optimization, and this is where we're increasing the number of graduates. We're making the box bigger. In terms of fall-to-fall retention, I just wanted to point this out because this is where you actually start having to slug. This is the heavy lifting. This is the Aspen 150, 57% graduation rate. And by the way, the Aspen also looks at total success rate, which is FTIC graduation rate plus transfer rate. Most of the Aspen schools are in the 80s in terms of total success. Here's U.S. community colleges. Here's Ohio community colleges. In Ohio, you may be embarrassed to know that whatever your FTIC graduation rate is, your transfer rate's about the same percentage. And finally, here's Terra States in terms of your retention. I said FTIC, this is retention rate. So again, what you're seeing is here a statistical difference in Ohio from the top 150 performing, and a statistical difference between Terra and U.S. community colleges. So that means there's some things you need to be doing about retention. And the reason retention is important is we're going to talk about something you've probably never heard about. It's called the maximum graduation rate. I only found out about it about 2 years ago. And I was always kind of guessing how many graduates we're going to produce. Now I know, because the maximum graduation rate, all you're doing is simply taking your fall-to-fall retention rate for a cohort group, whether it be full-time or part-time, and this composite is actually 65% of which number? Part-time, 65% of this number, and 35% of that number, okay? So what this says for you, is based on the last published information I had about your retention rates, the maximum graduation rate that Terra could achieve, which you had a 12.2, was 16%. That's the maximum, okay? So here's what that works out to. Here's your maximum graduation rate. You look at the difference between the theoretical and the maximum, and by optimizing some strategies for graduation, works out to about 107 additional graduates for you. So we're beginning to make up some space on that 300 plus graduates that we needed to make up. So in terms of what types of things we can do, first of all, look at implementing some progression tools. And one of the best progression tools is the 75% report. A 75% report is you take your degree audit and you run it, and you try to find every student who has completed at least 75% of their degree requirements. The first time you run it, you're going to be sick at your stomach. The second time, you'll be a little queasy, meaning the second year. The third year, you'll have butterflies. By the fourth year, you will have cleaned up a lot of mess. At Jacksonville, when we ran the 75% report, over 500 additional graduates, students who had more hours than the degree, and so we were able to pick those up. But where the real advantage comes in is you're able to use that 75% report to determine what classes are needed for those students that are closest to graduation. So you can ensure that those classes are scheduled at your institution. And what's cool is the data is all coming from this auto grad that you've ran. So the richer the data, meaning if you decide you can run every single POS or program of study against every single student, that's the richest hair standing up database or data set that you can get for your college. The 75%, again, I talked a little bit, it provides a listing of courses. Our managers at both CF or College of Central Florida and at Florida State College of Jacksonville used it for scheduling. Let's go back. Homer Simpson duh moment, okay? When I designed this 75% report at Jacksonville, I didn't put a distribution analysis. And so unfortunately at Jacksonville, when they get the 75% report, they have to click on every student's name and manually look at their degree audit, because it doesn't say we've got 15 who need this course, 10 that need this one. When we went to College of Central Florida, one of the first things that we did was auto pop. That was the first thing we did. The second thing we did was the 75%, and we did the distribution analysis on it. Made life so much easier. Here's what the progression matrix looks like at Jacksonville. I know you can't see it that well, but this is a live link to all those students. And the headers that you see above are 25% completion, 33% completion, 50%, 66, 75, 100%, and graduated. Now, the other thing I want to point out is the reason I picked this particular program is this is a continuing ed program, so it works on both credit and non-credit programs. The other thing I want to point out, the reason we did 100% complete and graduated is, at least in non-credit programs, we see almost an 8% difference. They completed all the degree requirements, but there's some piece of paper missing someplace. And it's about 3% on college credit. In fact, the first year we ran it, and notice that difference, we pulled them up, and guess what was the number one thing that was holding them up from graduation? Where's the librarians? Librarian fines. And that year, I paid about $350 out of my own pocket to get about 150 graduates. Now, I don't want you to tell the students at Jacksonville this, but after that, what we found, what we did, we talked with our business office. You can run up an unlimited library fine at the college. And if you make it to graduation, we're going to waive it. You know, God bless you. Because we'll get more money from our state funding system for you as a graduate than we lost in library fines. This is what the student sees, and what the student sees is where they are in terms of these percentage of completions. We did a click analysis, and guess what we found on the click analysis? The student checked which program they had the highest completion rates in to see what courses they might have to take. So it began to drive some student behaviors. For the nerds, taking my little fancy S-curve generator, this is what a normal completion rate looks like, and this is what the actual completion rate looks like. Now, the advantage to me I don't know about for y'all. I can identify two problems right off the bat. This one we'd probably all know about. This is fall-to-fall retention. So real quickly, I know what the fall-to-fall retention looks like, and it doesn't look pretty for this particular program. But this is the one that bothered me, and this was very consistent. I was taught if you got students to the 50% mark, you know, you could kind of sit in your beach chair and have a Corona because you kind of get them in there. Well, look at how many students we were losing at that 50% mark. And you can actually drill it down to a specific section. And by crosswalking what courses you're teaching at what completion points, you suddenly know that you got a problem in 2 courses. So you're able to isolate the problem real quickly. In terms of maximizing program design, what you're doing is looking at relevant programs, program length, and certificates. And relevant programs, you know, what you're wanting to do is make sure that you have programs that are tied to the local labor market. You don't want students who are going through your associate degrees saying, do you want fries with that after they graduate? When I looked at the gap analysis, Jack was nice enough to have the Ohio Association of Community Colleges run a labor market analysis of your service area, where it looked at not only, it looked specifically at the programs you were producing graduates in, and then the competitors that are in your service area that are producing graduates in the same area, same programs, and then looked at the labor market demand in your service area for those graduates. Well, of the 497 SOC codes, and if you don't know what a SOC code is, it's each one of your programs feeds into an occupation. So that matches up to, in this particular case, the analysis they did with 88 different programs. In this region, there's an undersupply of graduates for about 56% of your program mix. There is an oversupply of graduates for about 44% of your program mix. Where are my nurses? Okay, let me get close to the door. You know, what you will notice, by the way, this report you could probably get from Jack. It was shared with Terra. Nursing is got the biggest gap, nursing and medical assisting. In fact, in Jacksonville, medical assisting in our region, because every state-supported, every private, every for-profit had medical assisting. And in our region, we are supplying 12 years supply every year for the available job market. In the case of nursing, what you're seeing is a shift in terms of the job demands. You're probably not placing as many students at the hospitals as you used to. Your median wage is probably going down. And what's driving that, there was a national study that came out, 60% of the nurses under the age of 40 have a BSN now. So your ADNs are actually competing with BSNs, and that wasn't the case 5 years ago. It wasn't the case 10 years ago. In terms of probably something else you're probably not looking at is your competition. And the reason I wanted to point this out, in terms of the total graduates being produced in your program areas, y'all account for 5%. So when you start doing this analysis that you're talking about, you need to look at the competition and make some determinations of where we're strongest and where we're not. In the case of Jacksonville and medical assisting, we decided to invest in medical assisting. Because first of all, we determined fairly quickly we had to be first to mind if we're going to be successful. And the reason I say first to mind is that if we weren't first to mind, because of the number of the glut of graduates, we needed some way to get our students at the front of the line. So we reinvested in equipment, we reinvested in in facilities. And one of the things we actually did before I left is we hired a company that's only job is to help place our medical assisting students so that they can be the first hired. And then we'll let the Corinthians and the Kaplans and those nice people do their own thing. So what this means, I also took a look at your 10-year growth in graduates. And what it came out is that based upon that growth, you've got about 54% of your programs actually having either no growth or declining growth in the number of graduates. And 38% having growth. And this group here, this is accounting for about a quarter of your total graduates at your college. So what that means is about 1 in 5 of your programs may not be relevant. I'm not going to say need to be inactivated. I'm going to say may not be relevant. They may need massive curriculum revision in order to become more relevant, or they may need to be closed down. So you'll have an activity that you'll be able to work on based on this labor market provided by the Ohio Board of Regents, by the Ohio Association of Community Colleges. The other thing you need to ask is if you have a program that is over 60 hours, are those 60 hours adding additional significant value to that degree? Here's your program mix here at Terra. Your median program length here is fairly high. You got a range of 62 to 74 hours. And your median, because with the exception of 3 programs, all your programs have ranges. Not good. 67 to 73% is or 67 to 73 credit hours is your median range at this college. But look up here. Only 11% of your total programs, associate degree programs, are 61 or more hours. You have no programs that are at 60 by themselves. They're 60 to 71, but none that are just plain old 60. The impact of this, and since I'm from Texas, I can pick on Texas, okay? In Texas, they're very much like Ohio. They don't have a common curriculum framework like we have in Florida. In Florida, all business programs have to be the exact same length. They have to have the exact same learning outcomes. How we get to those learning outcomes is a local decision, but the program length and the learning outcomes are the same, okay? Texas is like y'all. Programs can run between 60 and 72 hours. Don't have to be the same. They do have a common course manual, but all bets are off learning outcomes. So we took a look at the 10 largest community colleges in Texas, and the programs they had in common were business and office systems. In Texas, only 2 out of the 10 were at 60 hours. The range was from 60 to 69, and here's the average and the median. Office systems, 1 of 10. And 2 of these large systems were right up against each other. It wasn't like these two, they share the Dallas market. And it's not like North Dallas versus West Dallas has that much of a significant difference where one was requiring 69 and the other one was requiring 60. So what's the difference? Well, the impact of those additional hours, I'm going to give you a theoretical. This college has a 66 credit hour. 35% of their students are full-time, so it's very much like yours. They have a fall-to-fall retention rate of 60. Their part-times have a 40%. And this is what the theoretical graduation rates are going to be for these programs. Now look what happens if the program is 60. You're going to end up with much higher graduation rates. And the other part is you're going to get more efficient, because this college that only has 60 credit hour programs is going to require 21% fewer students to produce the same number of graduates. So at Terra, with a median range of 60 to 70, for every credit hour, your median range is over 60, your graduation rate goes down 3.3%. It costs you 67 additional graduates. That's associate degree graduates only, not talking about certificates. 67 additional graduates per hour over 60. So the impact is from 401 to 700 additional graduates. So we've already made up our 340, haven't we? That's good news. Oh, by the way, just FYI, this is my picture now. Okay. You'll see some pictures that have been going with me for 10 years. This is my picture. It's going with me. It'll be in these slides from now on. And that's a Terra State picture. So based upon the total hours, you have to recruit 15 students to produce one graduate right now. And if you were at 60 hours, you would only have to recruit 12. So 20% fewer students to produce one graduate. So again, you're talking about some efficiencies at your institution. And that's part of the reason why Ohio is looking at it reducing. You will notice my block is around here on 64 because I disagree with Ohio's 65. I think that's way too high. That's a cop-out, quite frankly. I think it should be 64, 63. But what you see in the state of Ohio is it'll result in an 11% increase in FTE, or full-time graduates, and a 22% increase in part-time graduates. So that's part of the reason that you're being pushed in this direction. Again, contrary to popular wisdom, longer is not better. Because again, what you want to know is, did that add significant value to that certificate? Your programs that you have, if you've got a program that is, well, your LPN program, we'll talk more about, or your LPN, your RN program. The fact that your program is much longer than ours in Florida, I don't see Ohio hospitals coming down to recruit students, or Florida hospitals, going up to Ohio to recruit your students. You know, in Tennessee, they have 60-hour. I don't see Tennessee businesses coming up to Ohio to recruit your students. So you really need to take a critical look and really make hard judgments about, well, this is at 63. My question is, it's name that tune. Can you name that tune in 60? Because again, on your programs, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot about 3% of your graduation because of hours over 60. Certificate programs now, let me tell you, I love your short certificate programs you have here. That was one of the great surprises when I started looking at your programs. I can actually trace back and tell you when you did that, because part of what my little S-curve does is it generates profiles, and I can take a profile. That's too nerdy for you. Anyway, I know that's what you did by looking at your curves. That doesn't sound right either. Nancy, I need to go to that harassment class. But the great thing about certificates are certificate holders earn these certificates. They'll keep coming back and coming back. And they tend to be, you had the speaker who told about the issues that you're having with education rates with Latinos, African Americans. You'll find out that you'll actually push up the attainment rate in these subgroups. And you'll find when you start looking at the statistics that they earn roughly the same amount of money as students who got some college but didn't earn a degree. Now, here's the graduation mix, and I told you 50%. My only really criticism, and what you have is 59 students who graduated from programs that are less than a year in length, and 4 from the long ones. this is an area you need to evaluate. These tended to be your older certificate programs that you had. So again, you may want to take a look at them. I didn't look at them in great detail, but again, it's something that you want to explore. So when we started impacting or started coming up with certificate programs and looking at this mix, at Jacksonville, here's when I got there. We had 236 programs. 173 programs. A 26% reduction in the total number of programs at the college. The number of enrollments, unduplicated degree-seeking students in workforce programs doubled in fewer programs. The number of graduates produced in fewer programs, the big N, doubled by serving fewer students. So there's some really good points. In fact, what you see, this is the percentage of programs that lead to what we call high-wage, high-skilled jobs as defined by Florida. We had a 176% increase in the number of programs that lead to a high-wage, high-skilled job. I will tell you personally, it's easier to retain a student who's looking at an entry-level job of $22 an hour versus one who's looking at an entry-level job of $9 an hour. So again, that helped with our retention rates. By the way, the retention rates at Jacksonville went from 39.9% fall to fall to 72% in that time frame. Impact on the associate degrees. This is unique because in Florida, we had to be real selective with which programs we pulled because program length is dictated by the state frameworks. But still, we were able to have a 3% reduction in our median program length, and that ended up a 17% gain in our theoretical. And we actually, when you do the theoretical calculation for Jacksonville versus the actual, there's only about 0.1% difference between the theoretical and the actual, so we pretty much maxed out our systems at that particular institution. Impact on certificate programs. We had a 63% increase in the number of certificate programs, a 76% length or 76% increase in short certificate programs at our college. The other strategy is advising for impact, which we'll talk more about. You should be aware of this. This is the average hours to earn a degree in Ohio. Somebody said, geez. Amen. This is high. Really high. And in this state, the median program length in the entire state is 69 hours. Okay? So the impact, because of these longer lengths, is a lot fewer graduates in Florida. And again, when you specifically look at the average hours to degree at Terra, what you see is a great reduction. Now, I'm not sure about this number. You know, I think this is when y'all changed from a quarter system. It's not? Okay, the footnote on 2009 is really not clear, and it looks like a statistical outlier to me for y'all. But maybe y'all have worked on it. I don't know. But again, you're around 68, 67 hours, which is better than the state. Again, part of the reason that you've got to be concerned about this with advising is 65% of your students are part-time and only 35% are full-time. And what you find out when you look at your graduation mix is about 68% of your graduates are full-time students and about 32% are part-time. So that underutilized section of your market is getting those part-timers to graduation. Advising questions. These are some advising questions that not only I suggest that your advisors talk about, but your faculty, the faculty talk about in your classrooms. Because we're dealing with a lot of first-time, first-generation students. And these students really don't have any roadmap on how they're supposed to complete. They're not cued in to keys that will help them be successful. So what we know is W's are bad. In fact, nationally, if you receive a W on 20%, which basically for a part-time student who gets one W, they're going to reduce the probability of them graduating by 51%. In Florida, we know it's 83% for those W's. And we make it real easy to withdraw from school, don't we? In terms of Fs, we know in Florida that an F reduces the probability of graduating by over 91%. Now, the reason I bring up the W's and the L's is that those are two things you can catch immediately. You could catch every student who enrolled this spring that had 20% W's and 20% L's, pull them in and start advising them immediately. The other advising questions is how do you go about maximizing the student yield? In terms of the student yield, what you're looking at is trying to reach 20 credit hours in a year. Because what we know is a student who takes 20 credit hours is almost 3 times more likely to graduate than a student who doesn't meet that standard. 20 is golden in the first year. How are you going to build summer buzz? And that's not by drinking Coronas. Oh, that was a bad joke. We know that if a student takes summer courses, they're 3.1 times more likely to graduate. In fact, Cliff Adelman did a seminal research on what's called Toolbox Revisited. And what he found just blew me away. For every college credit hour that a student takes during the summer, they increase the probability that they will graduate by 15%. And it's cumulative. So if I take 3 hours this year, I increase my odds by 45%. If I take 3 credit hours next summer, I increase my odds by 90%. My wife and I feel so strongly about this that each of our nieces and nephews, when they graduate from high school, we pay for their summer school. We have our nieces and nephews go directly into college the summer that they graduate from high school, and every summer thereafter, we pick up the tab. Some of the schools, Lorain County, for example, is currently giving scholarships to high school students who come to them to register for classes in the summer. And then what are you going to do to encourage those students to take math and English in the first 2 years? Because we know if they're able to take college level math in the first 2 years, they're about 3 times more likely to graduate, and college level English about 2.4 times. At both Jacksonville and CF, our state legislature decided that there was no such thing as remediation, so we no longer remediate. There's no remediation, period. That's not bad, because back in, when I first started teaching, we also didn't have required remediation. And my guess is the graduation rate was higher back then than it is now. So we require at both Jacksonville and at CF that the student before the 12th credit hour is required to take college level English before they're allowed to advance any further. And then depending on the programs, most of the programs we have at Jacksonville now require college level math before the 24th credit hour. The other thing that we did at Jacksonville is, the HOEs, the W's, we started putting a hold process on, so when a student came in to say they were going to drop, we actually held that document for 2 weeks. We had a 2-week window to try to convince that student that they shouldn't withdraw. And we saw about a 15% drop in the number of W's. We implemented an early alert system. That's all I'm going to say about that, because my opinion on early alert systems is they're not early and they don't alert. And we'll explain more later. And again, I talked about requiring the college level English. Scheduling for success. Some of the things I'm going to kind of ask that you look at Are your students taking a look at or taking advantage of compressed schedules? Because what we know from a study that was done by Jeffy is that shorter week semesters actually do have benefits. They result in increased levels of student success and actually real knowledge, meaning success in that secondary course that they're following. And what I liked about that study is it tried to look at what the optimum range was. So that appeals to a nerd. And they know the lower range is about 4 weeks. But because of their sample size, they couldn't determine what the upper range is. I suspect it's somewhere between 8 and 10, maybe lower, maybe 8. But again, some real knowledge occurred in these shorter programs. In fact, this is, some of y'all may know Gilbert de los Santos. Gilbert is now the executive director of the League for Innovation. And back when he was at Brookhaven College, he had an accelerated program where they were trying to get students through an AA degree in 1 year, 60 hours in 1 year. So they did 2 years of really good work. And they broke theirs up into 4-week terms into a semester. And what you see in the first 4 weeks is a significant difference between their student success rate and what the rate was for a 16-week course. Significant increase, and then it drops below. In follow-up studies that have been done, almost always in that last 4-week period, you see a decrease. Anybody want to guess why? Burnout, I think that's part of it. Fall semester, what happens the last 4 weeks of the semester? Thanksgiving, Christmas. Life becomes a little bit more stressful. When does your spring break usually occur? You know, what I don't understand about spring break, how many of your students come back as zombies after spring break? I wonder why we do that. I've always wondered why, except when I was a student, which is... Are your students taking advantage of hybrid classes? And the reason for that is that we know that hybrid classes are almost the same as face-to-face. There's actually no statistical difference, but they do have much lower withdrawal rates than fully online, and they also have higher success rates than fully online. And it's also a way that you can leverage a student so that they have to spend less physical time at your campus. It's a way of basically doubling the footprint of your college. And this is specifically for Jack. I was up at 2 o'clock trying to track down this particular, y'all can't see it, the only 2 people who are going to be excited about it are me and Jack. This was a study that we did at Jacksonville. The N was 229,000. We only did it on a limited number of courses, and what we looked at was the difference of modality on student success rate. And the reason I highlighted this was back when we did remediation. And what it points out is that we had statistically significant student success rates in, and I know you can't see this, but this is a remedial math. This is a remedial math, and this is a remedial math. And this was hybrid. In fact, we did away with face-to-face, and we did away with online for remediation, and then the state of Florida did away with remediation, so that was their response to our research. Scheduling class, how far out do you cancel your classes? Do you cancel your classes the day before class starts? Yeah. I talked with the deans, yeah. What we found at Jacksonville is if you canceled a class 3 days prior to the start, those students were less likely to take the same amount of credit hours that they originally signed up for. So both at Tomball College and Jacksonville, we went to a week. The week prior to the start, everything that was on that schedule at that point in time made. Everything else that didn't make, it gave us time to get those students into other sections. Also, we all use a lot of adjunct. And, as a dean, I remember walking an adjunct down because I hired him at 8. Class, here's your instructor. And they're going, So, been there, done that, screwed up a generation of students. Yep. In terms of these causes of excess hours, about 2% of the reason that you have at your college and at any college is because of the unavailability of courses. And so that's part of the driver that you're seeing with the excess hour requirements at your school. I know I'm using a lot of photographs of planes, and that's because, unfortunately, I spend a lot of time on airplanes. How many of y'all have ever gone to the airport late? Your plane is on the taxiway, ready to take off, and the plane has turned around to come back to pick you up. I actually had a person hold up their hand. This was in Montana. They were flying King Airs, carry 6 passengers. The plane turned around, came back, picked her up. So it doesn't happen that often. But we do that all the time in education. And we call it late registration. We bring the plane back. And what we know nationally is about 8% of students are register late. And when I say register late, after the official day of registration, and in most cases after the first day of class. And what we know, and we have known for years, is late registration is a significant predictor of semester performance and student retention. And Dr. Roosh, who I have a great deal of respect for, he was over the University of Texas Hook'em Horns Community College Leadership Program, says that this is one of the quickest ways to improve your retention rates, is doing away with late registrations. Impacted FSCJ, we did away with late registration, and one semester we increased our retention, or 1 year we increased our fall to fall retention by 8% and improved it by 5% for our part-time. Now, as an administrator, that took a great deal of leap. That was one of those steps where you go, oh my God, I hope there's a step there. Because on one hand, you may be shooting yourself in the foot in terms of additional tuition revenue. What we found at Jacksonville after looking at it was, first of all, retain student at your institution, and y'all can look at this, but it's in the research and the institutions I've looked at, it's true. After you retain a student for a year, whatever their course load was for their first year, they actually increase their course load in the second, increase their course load in the third. It doesn't go up as dramatically. And then in the fourth and fifth, you begin to see a decline in yield. So that back end yield may make up for that revenue you lose potentially on the front end. Noel Levitz has a tool, I'm talking to your business officer now, has a tool that you can actually go online and do scenarios, and it'll do the calculations for you. I know you're doing this, you're promoting active learning strategies. We all have them. I heard about what you were doing with what essentially was the old authentic learning tasks in your manufacturing programs. These are types of things that where you're really grinding out that increase in retention rate. And so things I want to talk to you about is you really need to look at strengthening your online courses, because here's what we know nationally about online courses. They're more likely to result in failure or withdrawal. A student who is in online courses is significantly less likely to return to your college. And finally, they're significantly less likely to attain an educational award. So the key thing that you've got to remember about your online is you need to begin to improve the quality, the Quality Matters initiative that they have for online. So you can begin to build up the support. Because what you find out at your institution, specifically at Terra, and this number has been growing, 11% of your students are fully online. That means they never set foot on your campus. You have a large number who are enrolled in some, and then again, 61% of your students don't take advantage of online at all. So make sure you have the good quality in your programs. In fact, we saw this research early at Jacksonville. This is what we did in terms of our programs online. And this is what the results were. We call ours serious. We had 18% higher student success rates and 4.8% lower withdrawal rates. But I'll tell you right now, there's still a statistical, at Jacksonville, there's still a statistical significant difference between online, hybrid, and face-to-face. 71% of our students at Jacksonville were successful over a 10-year period that we did the tracking, versus 82% and 83%, 83% face-to-face, 82% hybrid. And there was a statistical one standard deviation difference. But it was better than the almost 2 standard deviation difference that we had prior. So the overall impact at Jacksonville, impact on workforce, we had a 150% increase in the number of graduates. We had a 4.7% growth in FT in our efficiencies, a 2.5% growth in our unduplicated headcount, and again, we went from 0.42 graduates per FTE to 0.77 per FTE. This is the number, this is the one I'm really proud of. This is STEM. This came out of Community College Weekly. We had a 249% increase in STEM graduates. And this number right here, how many of y'all are seeing significant declines in your STEM programs? Most schools are. We actually increased the percentage share of graduates to almost 7% of all of our graduates coming out of STEM programs at JAX. Overall impact, about a 2 times, which is growth in graduates, which far exceeded the growth that we had experienced in terms of the number of students. So do these strategies work? Well, this is kind of one of these stupid slides that I put in. I'm going to sit up and talk to you for an hour and then say, they don't work, Yeah, they work. This is based on the last 15 colleges that I've worked with over a 2-year period. And what I'm looking at is rapid increase in graduation. If you look at the top, almost a 37% increase in graduation over a 2-year period. That's a total in. 52% increase in the number of certificate graduates. 31% increase in the number of associate degree graduates. In fact, this is one of my favorite schools, Pillissippi. This was when Dr. Edwards, who was the president, who brought me in, and Dr. Wise, who took it upon himself to keep me around for a couple more times, when they had their investiture. In 2009, 2010, Pillissippi, the most they had produced was 882 graduates. In terms of the Tennessee system, they were in the lower quartile in terms of the number of graduates produced by the community colleges. 2010, we came in the fall, and this is the first year bump we saw. 1,429 graduates, 12% increase in the number of associate degrees, huge increase in certificates. In fact, the year prior, they only had 5 graduates from certificate programs. They didn't change their mix. These students were students who had actually graduated from these programs, but they weren't graduating them. They did away with their need to fill out a graduation application. They did away with the need to pay a graduation fee. They started by doing a lot of these things manually while they could get them programmed. And so it was really a great implementation plan that they did. 2011, 2012. Ta-da! 3,967 graduates. 167% increase. They went from the lower quartile to the #1 school in the production of graduates in 2 years. That's impressive. That's truly impressive. And that's part of the reason that President Obama, with the Promise Initiative, went to Pellissippi. Closing thought. This is one of my favorite closing thoughts, or quotes. You know, few of us will ever achieve greatness and be great enough that we can bend history. But each of us can make a small change in the community that we live in. And I truly believe that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be traipsing up to some place that was 19 degrees with some white stuff that I thought was seafoam until I actually stepped into it. But you have the ability, each of you individually have the ability to impact the graduation rates here at Terra. Because the core question I've got for you is real simple. You know, I could have gone straight to this slide. We could have had a real nice leisurely morning together. But what's your number? What's motivating you? Is it about the students? Questions? By the way, the tassel is worth the hassle. Questions?
What were the primary strategies used at Pellissippi to increase their grade?
The first things they did were auto pop, auto grad. They used Banner, but before they could get it programmed, they actually did it the manual way. They had what they call graduation parties. So imagine a room about a quarter of this size with a long table, a bunch of people around it, manually doing these systems. The president would bring in pizza, they'd all sit around and work through individual student records. It was a great story about how they were able to ramp up while they waited for automation. The other side story on that was Anthony didn't tell them that they were going to automate. So you had all these people doing these graduation parties, and this is mind-numbing, let me tell you. You know, you're looking at these transcripts and you're evaluating them against every single program you've got, and it makes your head hurt. And then after they did that for a while, that first semester, Anthony was able to go, oh, by the way, we managed to automate that. People loved him. You know, they were going, oh God, I don't want to do that again. But they could see the benefit of what they were able to do manually with what they could do through the system. From that point on, they have gone to the required English within the first, they do theirs within the first 12 credit hours too. The freshman year experience, similar to what y'all have done. They're making more use of hybrid courses at their institution. They wiped out a lot of their program mix and did a change on their program mix. They tried to get ahead of the Tennessee effort to go to 60. And so I won't say they outran the Tennessee Board of Regents, but they were a step ahead. And we also identified some benchmark colleges. Is there one college I'll truly hate who's a competitor? For me, it's Valencia. Okay. In fact, I'm the only person in the state that gets Valencia's data submission. They send it directly to me, and I spend a month slicing and dicing Valencia to find out their secret sauce. By the way, Valencia has been named 3 consecutive years in Aspen. They were named the first winner, okay? But I've learned a lot from them. True, I hate saying that. Don't take that back to them. And really, the reality is they know I get it, their data submission, and I actually have people from their college calling me saying, hey, Jim, how do we do on this particular aspect, because I've got this pre-templated how to destroy Valencia plan, and I just throw it in. But I'm sure you have one of those colleges. Some of us do. But Pillissippi's was Chattanooga. And we dissected Chattanooga to the point where we knew what color their eyes were. And because what we could see from Chattanooga, they were already taking preliminary steps to try to get ahead of performance-based. And Anthony really wanted to just clobber Chattanooga. And I won't tell you the T-shirt he wore, because that you'll have to get the word from him. But it was cute when they announced what they did. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Of the schools that you examined with 60 hours or 60 credit hour programs, did they include a first-year seminar or new student orientation success?
Some do. What you'll find is I've only found 3 schools that I've dealt with that have a FYE seminar that's in all their programs, like y'all do. That's nice to see. I'm going to tell you now, the freshman year experience on a study that we did in Florida is not a silver bullet, but at least it's painted the right color. People who go through freshman year experience in Florida are 27% more likely to graduate than people who don't go through freshman year experience. What I see in the more progressive schools, and what you'll see in the Aspen 150s, is most of them will have at least about half of their programs with the freshman year experience in them. It's more common. Where's my allied health people? Okay. It's less common to see it in the allied health, and part of that has to do with y'all's accreditation and trying to carve out the room. But I think, again, I'll break for the door so y'all see if the nurses come after me. I think it should be required for all programs, personally. Until you find solid evidence that there's no impact, the evidence is overwhelming that there is an impact. Yes, sir.
We've had a growing number of hybrid course offerings. We've also had a heck of a time getting substantial enrollment in those courses. You got any strategies for getting students in?
The same is true at most institutions that try, and I can pretty well predict how y'all have done it. If you did anything, you put a note in the schedule saying this is a hybrid, and probably didn't do a really good job of saying what a hybrid is. That school that's in Orlando that starts with a V, I just can't think of their name. Valencia. They actually sent out mailers with really nice descriptions that someone at Central Florida ripped off to use to use at our school. And they've had better results than just about, God, I don't want to say that, just about any school I know with their hybrids. But it's communication, because it's they understand online. Hybrid is a longer elevator speech. And so you really need faculty input, talking about it in classrooms, and some really good descriptors and visuals on how a hybrid may be more beneficial for a student. I'll be honest, if I was the king of the world, no first time in college freshman would be allowed to take a fully online course until they had completed at least 12 credit hours. And if I couldn't get approval for that, I would require locus of control, some sort of locus control exam, because there's definite correlation between the higher the locus control, the more successful they would be. And that would be just like an SAT. If you want to take it in the first 12 hours, your locus of control has to be off the boards, and then we'll consider doing that. Yes, sir.
You mentioned, I'm going to rewind quite a bit here. You mentioned our we don't have many graduates in those, and maybe those aren't the things we ought to be looking at, because you seem to really like the small ones. And I would love what more small certificates are gonna do to our graduation rates. But in the state of Ohio, we have this funding model thing that says it's the large certificates that are rewarded. It's 30 hours or more certificates.
And that's has been an issue in Ohio that I fully don't understand. I think people tend to poo-pah certificates. If you come to the certificate the degree and certificate design, we'll talk more about the earning potential. And there's really, I will tell you, I'll give you a preview. In Florida, what I can tell you is a graduate from a certificate program makes more than an AA student who doesn't go off to a state university in Florida. And our short certificate, our median salary for a short certificate at Jacksonville, less than 15 credit hours, was $54,000. And we'll talk more about why that was. I would like to see, if they're going to evaluate you on the basis of certificates, what the state doesn't realize, and again, I'm giving away part of what I'm going to talk about later, but on your certificate programs, if your metrics are they employed in the field, and are they continuing their education? Typical certificate program is going to give you a student success rate of over 85%. The hair on my arm and the hair on my head popped up for that. That's significant. That is really significant. I think the issue with your longer certificates is I'm giving away part of what I'm going to talk about. They really need to be scaffolded better, and we'll talk more about that. Yes, sir.
You mentioned earlier in your presentation about the difficulty with getting program of study and major codes correct. It sounds like it should be a simple thing to do, but we know it's not always that way. What are some of the best practices or techniques that have been used by the successful institutions to ensure those codes are correct?
Okay, good question. The first school to ever do anything with program of study codes was Jacksonville. We published a paper way back when. I went to AACC meeting, heard CCRC, and that quote that you saw up there actually was from that CCRC meeting. And then a lot of my stories start, I was in a bar, okay? And my vice president of instruction and myself were in a bar. We both gone to that meeting. We're both just wired. And on the back of a bar napkin, we mapped out the protocol for doing auto program of study. Now, we did what was called back end at that point. We actually took your course taking behavior and we would assign the program of study code automatically based on your course taking behavior. And that worked well and fine until Jim went and served on the negotiated rulemaking for the U.S. Department of Education for gainful employment. So now you know who to blame. And that changed the rules. And so the schools that are most successful that use this approach, and the financial aid people will go amen, is you treat them, every program, except your certificate programs, like a restricted access program. So if Jim says he's in underwater basket weaving and tries to take a course in welding, Jim cannot take a course in welding until he talks with someone and changes that major code. Jim needs to understand what the repercussion is, specifically if they're financial aid. Jim needs to understand the repercussion if they're trying to degree shop. There's actually software out there that you can get now. Civitas has one where a student can actually go in and it does automatic matches. It says, okay, you're taking this one. If you really wanted to change your degree, here are the best ones to do it so that you don't lose many hours. And the schools that are using the Civitas project, God, how many times have I had to say their name at this? Valencia, University of Central Florida are the two schools that are using it in Florida. Valencia's had really good results. In fact, the Civitas project, I was telling Jack about it, before the first day of class, that particular software tool has a 95% predictive about whether the student's going to be successful in the classroom. So when you go into class as an instructor, you've got this screen that has these silhouettes of students, and they're green, yellow, and red. And so you kind of know automatically that Jim's going to, Jim's going to be a problem. Jim's always been a problem. My physics instructor, Dr. Downing, I had the privilege of taking that course from him, same course 5 times. And I actually thought my name was Oh No, because I'd walk in, he'd go, Oh No. But again, it would have predicted Jim was going to have problems in that physics course, that sophomore year, or that second semester physics course. And so you're able to do your early alert earlier. But that's a good question. Again, the simplest approach, you're probably already you're treating your nursing program now as a restricted access program. They have to apply for admission. And it's a simple little toggle that you can do in your ERP. You simply make it true for all of your program areas. Good question. Other? Well, thank you very much.
We thank you for this great presentation. We look forward to the other presentations you'll be doing this afternoon. We have brunch that is going to be served just shortly. The Cuyahoga group is getting ready to serve brunch for us. And so we will have members of the Convocation Committee who will be dispersing you to the buffet line. And I know Scott Eastern has a couple of announcements that he's going to be making during lunch as well about